Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness,
Darkness,
but ours.
but ours. Tonight, this kind of connects to some of our earlier discussions about folk horror. Because one writer who came up a few times during our discussion of it was David Rudkin.
Yeah.
And of course, the piece of the work of his that came up most of all in connection to it was his 1973 play for today, Penda's Fen.
Yes.
And so we decided this would be a good time to do a deep dive into this film, because I think it's definitely a film that is because it is. I mean, it's like just under an hour and a half long. So really, you can call it a play if you want. It's really a film. And it is ripe for deep diving because there is just so much going on.
So much crammed into it. And also because it was reissued fairly recently in Severin Films' All These Haunts Be Ours package as part of their folk horror collection. So, if anybody's likely to have gotten a hold of it suddenly, as opposed to just tripping across it on YouTube, which is what happened with me.
Yeah, I desperately wanted to see it. It wasn't available at the time, so yes, I found it on YouTube. But the BFI released a Blu-ray of it, which I snapped up very quickly, which has a very cool featurette as well, interviewing Rudkin and the producer David Rose and various other actors and playwrights about it. Sadly, the director Alan Clark passed away in about 1989, 1990.
Yeah.
But Clark, who directed it, was best known for usually for quite gritty, associated with quite gritty social realist type things. So there was always an element of political inquiry, anger, subversion to his work, but it was done in a very, very different way. He made the film Scum with which featured Ray Winstone.
Yeah.
Incredibly
young Ray Winstone.
Incredibly brutal, incredibly harrowing film. Made in Britain, which starred Tim Roth at the age of about 16, I think.
Yes.
As a sort of like skinhead with a swastika tattooed, and I think his last film was The Firm, not the Tom Cruise one, but starring Gary Oldman as the leader of a very vicious gang of football hooligans. And again, very gritty, very cinema verite, very kind of fly on the wall sort of technique, and quite different, a very, very different beast from Penda's Fen. But again, what he does with that work is, it's just an extraordinary. Now, obviously, I think it goes without saying there were going to be spoilers in this discussion. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
Maybe a quick précis of. It's probably a good idea to give a quick précis of the overall story before diving in.
Okay, so basically, it's the story told from the point of view of a young man. He's just about to turn 18. His name is Stephen Franklin. He is the son of the local pastor. And
Parson, I think Parson or
Parson?
Vicar, or Parson,
pastor. Okay, Parson. Yeah.
C of E, so Church of England. So I think it would be Parson or Rector would be.
I think you're right about that. At one point, he is correcting somebody in class who says that his dad's a priest. And he's like, no, it's a parson.
Honeyboon.
Yes, exactly. Honeyboon.
And there's a name. It's more than a little on the nose.
Somewhat,
as we shall say.
as it turns out. Anyway, when we first meet Stephen, he is a very redheaded, very freckled, and very disapproving of everything. The first two things he can't help. But the third thing he can totally help. And he's instead made himself into the guy who created The Simpsons, Matt Groening, used to do a comic strip which was reprinted in newspapers called Life in Hell. And one of the things that he created in that was a series of really silly magazines that don't exist, and one of the magazines was Young Fogey, and Young Fogey magazine. And I got to say that Stephen Franklin kind of strikes me as like the you know the the cover boy for Young Fogey magazine.
I can almost see him as a kind of like almost like very, I mean, I don't, like Darren, bit like Darren Grimes, who's this, if you American and Canadian viewers probably, hopefully don't know who he is, and you can count yourselves lucky. But he's this horrible little shit, who I think looks about 12. Not I think in his early 20s, but he's kind of like, you know, this kind of ultra right wing kind of, you know, they should let refugees crossing the channel drown, and all this kind of rhetoric, a truly poisonous little creep.
Yeah,
although
I mean, you know, it's like he these days you'd call him an incel. These days you'd call him, although he doesn't seem to hate women, he doesn't seem to think about them a lot.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think
he's like a gender essentialist, and you know, and right wing, and you know, like a nativist. You know, the kind of person who's like England first, England always. You know, super received accent.
yes. And essentially, over the course of the film, he has a series of experiences. Really, he has a series of visions and dreams, and personal revelations, which one by one basically destroy all of his certainties about himself. I mean, I think one of the things, I mean, just thinking back to the opening narration of the, it says here, England, you know, my country, it says, I am one of your sons. It is true. I am. And the insistence that's when he's saying that, it's almost like he's trying to convince himself.
Yes.
And you know how I think we talked about this when we did the podcast on queer horror. We were talking about people like Saki. You'll get people who are part of some marginalized group, or feel themselves to be part of some marginalized group, and kind of
or even suspect on some level that they're part of some marginalized group,
and kind of overcompensate that kind of against that by kind of doubling down and becoming, you know, the most reactionary, you know, incredibly reactionary and incredibly you know, intolerant towards other marginalized groups. And I get sort of going through the film, because for all that Stephen kind of tries to manifest the most, because I mean the school he's at, and I think Rudkin is drawing from a lot of material of a lot of his own background here. He mentions elsewhere having gone to a school which he said he loved for its for the emphasis it put on the classics and on Latin and Greek, and hated for its what he called its sub-fascist ethos, which is certainly something that Stephen's school has. It's got like its own cadet military force. It's very it's extremely a house system. It's very kind of, you know,
the thing Honeybone says about how he does nothing for Rugger. And therefore he should be boiled in oil.
Skinned first and then boiled alive. Yes,
that's right.
So there's a sense that even though Stephen is kind of trying to embody almost like the the most extreme form of what he thinks are the values of that school, he's not doing so in a way that's actually enabling him to be basically accepted among the ranks, accepted as sort of the norm. So it's almost like if you've seen Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ, and how at the beginning of that Jesus is making crosses for the Romans, because although he's not aware of being the Son of God, he's aware of, you know, God talking to him. God wants him to go out and do stuff, and he doesn't. He's terrified of that. He knows that it will mean something terrible for him. So he's actually trying to drive that to fight against that, and essentially he does it by trying to become something that God will not want to have anything to do with.
So a Jew who makes crosses.
Exactly. And you know, there's a sense in which Stephen strikes me as doing the same kind of thing. He's desperately trying. He knows deep down, I think, at some fundamental level, or the knowledge of who he really is struggling to kind of get out.
Although I would say that, he wants God to love him, as opposed to God loves me, I want him to stop. But, and one of the things that, I mean, there's like two things that really characterize Stephen that I see at the beginning. And the first one is that he is obsessed with Elgar. And, you know, Elgar's music is great. Sir Edward Elgar, who wrote, yeah, I mean, he wrote Jerusalem, right? Am I wrong about that?
The lyrics are actually by William Blake.
Yes, the lyrics are by Blake, which I always find really interesting, because Blake is not exactly a conservative dude.
This is, again, I mean, it's often sung at conservative party conferences in the UK, and it's sometimes called, like, you know, the sort of the second national anthem. If and when we do finally get rid of the inbred mutants we call a royal family, then I don't have a problem. I would be quite happy for that to take its place as the national anthem. But it is not a, you know, as a song, it is by no means a sort of an affirmation of conservative values, and in many ways it kind of underlines it underlines like the portrayal of Jesus or the references to Jesus in the film as having been this kind of anarchic revolutionary element that's been tamed, whose message has been tamed and subverted and twisted to reinforce an authoritarian doctrine, which is actually the antithesis of
everything that Jesus stood for in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about the chief schism of the church as having been, you know, we will interpret God's word for you so you don't have to, versus, you know, no, I'm going to wait until God speaks to me directly, and if he never does, then I guess that's the way it goes. Fuck me. You know? I wasn't worthy of it.
And it's interesting as well that, because he, as you say, he's obsessed with Elgar, and at the beginning of it, of course, the music we hear is Elgar's dream of Gerontius, and also Stephen's discussing it, doing his exegesis of it, exegesis, of it. And he says, the question that it poses is, what will happen to my soul? What is to happen to my soul?
Yes.
And in many ways, that's actually the theme of Penda's Sven, in a different sense. Yeah. In the sense of, if your soul is your true self, who you really are, what you have to remain, the part of yourself that is the most essential expression of who you are. Yes. What is to happen to that, and how do you stay true to that in a world that's often inimical to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've got that, his obsession with Elgar, his obsession with the dream of Gerontius, of being weighed and, you know, like examined before the throne of God, and weighed and possibly found wanting, but hopefully not, of being accepted by the male angel with the female voice. You know, who brings you before the throne of God so that you can be, you know, sort of boiled down to your barest essentials by, you know, God's scary glance.
Yes. It is that judgment. He talks about that other judgment that we must face day to day, that a choice we must make over and over, which is echoed later on by his teacher. You know, because I mean, because he resigns from the cadets, he's classified as a non-cooperative. Now, I don't know if this is perhaps something that's peculiar to the ethos of the sub-fascist ethos that Rudkin talks about
of the school.
It's not a phrase that I remember being used at Man, because this film was made. I mean, one of the things that really strikes me about this film, it's nearly 50 years old.
Yeah,
this film was made about a year before I was born. So again, of course, by the time I was in kind of the same position Stephen was in, it was like nearly 1990. So a very different, a very, very different sort of place. But by being a non-cooperative, and the teacher says, being a non-cooperative, that is a choice you'll have to make over and over again. Every day by day, so it kind of echoing. And
to some degree, the idea is that when people realize that you are a non-cooperative, that you are not willing to cooperate with the system around you, they will reject you over and over and over again. And the choice that you'll have to make again and again is whether or not to go along, to get along. You know, to go to decide, oh, well, fuck it. You know, it's like, I don't want to be the painted a bird anymore. I don't want to
Yeah,
be.
yeah. I mean, his father has a speech. I mean, there's a. I mean, one of the things I love about it
Mm,
is, this is very much about rebelliousness and about I mean, this sacred, almost sacred disobedience, which is actually the title of a study of Rudkin's plays, and
mhm.
kind of sums up what's at the root of a lot of this stuff. But there's a scene where he has this long conversation with his father. I mean, one of the things about it is that, although this is about a youth and it's about rebellion, he's actually this like, proto-fascistic little gobshite, and his parents are actually a lot more tolerant and open-minded, and for example, I mean, one of the nice things about it, especially when you consider the time it was made,
Mm,
is even though part of it is about Stephen wrestling with the realization of his own sexuality,
yes.
the fact that he desires other men.
Mm,
Um, there's never. I mean, his parents have worked that one out before he does. He's got this kind of there's a kind of subplot where he kind of like several encounters with Joel, the milk lad. Whereas the first time he's going down there, it's kind of like he dashes down to greet him and in his uniform, and Joel takes the mickey out of him, and he says, "I wish Joel would like me. He can be so cutting." And it's kind of like he wants the guy to like him, but he doesn't. He doesn't know why, or he's very
yeah.
deep in denial about why. And when he does, I mean, he has a very explicit erotic, well, fairly as explicit you could probably get away with in 1973,
Yeah.
erotic dream, where all the rugby team are kind of like scrumming in the gym, covered in mud, and a lot of attention played to thighs and buttocks. And
Yes.
he has a vision of the team captain Honeybone naked and with basically fire erupting from his crotch. And
Yes.
like I said,
It reminds me a lot of that moment in Kenneth Anger film Fireworks, where a guy dressed as a sailor unzips his, the very Querelle, shall we say, unzips his pants, and this this sparkler comes out of it.
well,
It's like,
I just kept thinking of that song, "Your sex is on fire."
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
as
when I
think it's
was
the name Honey.
teaching, a very, very gay student of mine had actually put a song together called "Oh, My Pussy Is on Fire," and did and shot a video to go with it, where the prettiest Russian girl in the class was running around, downtown Toronto, sort of miming to that, and you know her coat up in the front, and you'd see all this smoke coming out of her crotch. It's like, oh, my pussy is on fire.
But as I said, the name Honeybone is, especially given that context, is almost painfully on the nose there. But
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
after he has the,
he has that interaction with Joel, and then we cut to his parents, and his dad's like, "Oh, milk lad, the milk lad. Yes, I'm surprised he hadn't noticed him up till now."
yeah, everyone but him is kind of like,
Yes.
but I mean, after he has that, I mean, of course, another character we should probably mention is the character of Arn, played by Ian Hogg, who I think is very much a portrait of Rudkin himself in many respects.
I think so too.
Rudkin and his wife were found to be infertile at one point. One of his stage plays, probably the one that's been most performed, actually, because unlike a lot of his stage plays, it's comparatively straightforward to stage and doesn't kind of require, it doesn't require like a 3-hour running time, and it's some very inventive technical effects. Called Ashes, which was about that whole process and the struggle to have a child, adopt a child, or whatever. But Arn has a lot in common with Rudkin in that respect. But sort of, he's going on this rant about how he's always got people in him who are, there's always someone in his place who's unnatural. I think he's unnatural himself. That's why he and his wife haven't had children.
Haven't been blessed with children.
Been blessed with children. God doesn't make mistakes. He and of course he doesn't give children to people who don't deserve it or whatever. And of course, he of course, what, as we find out, Stephen is actually adopted, and his parents are not. He's not like this sort of heart of England stock. His parents are foreign. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly what from where exactly isn't specified, but of course he's been unthinkingly incredibly cruel to his parents by basically sort of saying, they're not blessed. These people aren't blessed with children because they don't.
Yeah, and his mom like rolls her eyes so far they look like they're gonna fall out of her head, and goes, "Oh, Stephen, you can be so grotesque."
Yeah, she's probably had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
She's probably perfected, can we do things with a simple eye roll that could, like, should be physically impossible by this point. But he's projecting a lot onto Arn there. I mean, Arn is kind of, it's sort of a mirror to Stephen, because at first he is he's like the embodiment of everything Stephen hates. He's this anti-authority.
Oh yeah, he denounces him in class as part of a rhetoric class or something.
Yeah. But he's sitting there in this town hall meeting with this permanent frown of disapproval on his face, and if looks could kill, as Arn goes on, and then Arn talks about the landscape and moves into this kind of encomium of how our gracious composer Elgar, has immortalized this in song, and kind of looks up and it's like, wait a minute. So you possibly the kind of the tirade against Arn kind of comes from there, because it's kind of like the sense of he might have something in common with this guy. No, he's disgusting. He likes men, and I'm not. I don't like men.
I mean,
I think about it all the time, and it's really it just disgusts me.
That's why I'm thinking about it all the time.
Yes.
One of the funnier things is that, yes, I had gotten the impression that at one point I wrote a note while watching the Penda Sven this time around, which was like, young bisexual doesn't understand why he does anything he does. young bisexual fascist doesn't understand.
Yeah, I think bisexual might be a little bit. I'm not seeing any evidence of any attraction to women.
I think the reason that I think that is because if we assume that Arn is sort of Rudkin himself, then Arn is married.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Again, Rudkin is bisexual. He has sort of he's written about this. It's in many of his plays. We don't. Other than Stephen's kind of projection of that onto Arn himself, I don't think we see any indication of that. But it's entirely. It would be entirely fitting. And Stephen refers to himself as mixed. I'm man, and my sex is mixed. I'm both man and woman. Of course, this is before trans was really a thing in terms of mainstream discourse, or if people or was understood purely in sense of of surgical transition of transsexual, which would have been different. So, but in terms of that phrase man and woman mixed, obviously indicating a confusion of traditional gender roles. And
I'll also point out that he's at an all boys school. He doesn't actually run across women very often who aren't his mum, or his mum's age.
The only women we encounter, we see the Milklad's girlfriend, I think, at one point, and that's the only sort of. All the other women are sort of his mother's age or older.
Yeah.
Going back to the Joel thing, actually, it's interesting how, as I say, there's quite a small number of interactions, but they're very telling, both in terms of where Stephen is at each point. Because the first time, like I say, he wants Joel to like him, but he can't. He's deep, he's so far in fucking denial, he's practically in Central Africa, about why. Then he has this kind of dream, because his father he actually asks his father, are dreams true, and can dreams come true? And his father says, well, dreams are already true. They're an expression of a truth that is kind of buried within you, and it's something, it's basically your subconscious trying to tell you something, and you need
and the responsibility of the dreamer is to recognize what your subconscious is trying to tell you
and acting on it
and act on it.
Which, of course, and when he has that intensely homoerotic dream, the first thing he wakes up and finds a demon that's actually crouching beside him in pure night terror fashion. But when the demon disappears, he says one word: unnatural.
Yes.
Recognizing that in himself, which leads, we think, directly to what it's implied that directly leads to his decision to drop out of the cadets.
Yeah.
Which is of course sets off other things in motion. But when Joel next comes by the house and knocks on the door, Stephen purposely stays in his room to avoid facing him.
Yes.
The next time he encounters Joel is he sees the milk floats, and there's like this little chick parked under one of the wheels.
Yeah.
And when Joel comes, he can't
talk to him. He just can't talk to him at all.
And so this poor little creature gets crushed.
Yeah, it's like, so, you've crushed the chick of my affection underneath your hard wheel.
or the chick has died because of his inability to express his feelings. And the final encounter with Joel is when he's come off his bike and Joel sort of helps him up, and he says, "I'm just helping you up, that's all." And of course he actually turns that into making a sort of he starts to he kind of not exactly makes a pass, but he certainly
but he sort of starts to stroke his hand down the same way that he did on Honeybone during the dream.
That's all.
That's all. It's like, I get it. I understand what's going on with you.
Yeah,
and it's fine, but I'm not like that. Look.
Yeah, he'll get over it, love. And he kind of waves goodbye. So there isn't any rancor in it, and I think that's one of the things that I found very interesting, especially when you consider the time it was made in, which was not exactly a time that was known for its high degree of tolerance or understanding of gay people. Where there's probably homophobia quite from the lads at school and from the teachers, I suspect, but from his parents and even from even from Joel, who the object of his affections, who rejects him, he doesn't do it in a like, oh, you disgusting pervert kind of way. It's in a sorry, no.
And we'll be continuing our discussion of Penda's Fen next week. What did you think of this evening's episode? Please let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed it, tell your friends and ask them to subscribe as well.
Till then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I remain Gemma Files.
And
this, of course, was
No Darkness
But
Ours.